I do think it's inherently patriotic doing what we do, right? Is because you have the ability, being a venture capitalist or an entrepreneur is more directly tied to it. But you get to build the world you want to see, right? Like in our society, if you think things are going wrong in our society, right, from a democratic perspective, you can actually go into the capital markets and enact change by creating solutions to solve the problems that you want to see in your society, which is deeply patriotic. Religion, that's another one that I think we've, as a society, have almost put a little bit of a negative spin on it to a certain extent. It's really important to me and who I am as a person, and how I bring myself in the world every day. And so if people are willing to talk about it, I'm unafraid to say, I'm a proud Catholic. I'm a person of faith. It's a really important a component of who I am in terms of my value system, in terms of, how we live our family life, in terms of how we interact in the world and the good we want to see in the world. And so I just think you can't detach away from those things, or else you're just not authentically you, and you're never going to be great at whatever you're doing if you're trying to be someone you're not.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Ma. Welcome to another episode of Alone Together, the podcast about the life of solo GPs. Today with Andy Will from Willpower, and I'm very excited for this conversation. I'm also sometimes the managing partner of Sidecut Ventures, and what's really cool, this is the second take that Andy and I have had on this pod. Due to my poor bandwidth, we had to trash the first episode, but the silver lining in all this is I get to spend another tranche of time with you. So thank you for being so gracious, for being, I can say this, you are now the first two-time guest on this pod. So thanks again for spending the time.
A distinct honor to be here. And look, we already had a dry run, so we know each other better. So it's just going to be a higher quality episode.
I'll knock on wood. Would you mind doing us this honor? I want to talk about the people and the person behind the fund, but that usually means starting with a little bit about you at the top level and the fund. So if you can tell us a little about Andy Will and Willpower, and then to set the stage for us, and we'll see where we go from the second half of the conversation.
Sounds wonderful. Happy to do it. Thank you so much for having me on the pod. Really excited to do it with you again. And Andy Will, I'm the managing partner here at Willpower Venture Capital. We're a Washington, D.C. based early stage venture capital firm. We invest in vertical market software companies that are late pre-seed through seed extension, and really enjoy supporting exceptional entrepreneurs that we have the privilege of working with. But I started my career in more traditional financial services on Wall Street, did investment banking and sales and trading at JP Morgan, moved over to the hedge fund side of things and traded mainly in a software book at a hedge fund called Tom's Capital Investment Management before going to business school at University of Chicago, working in venture full-time there, and then moving back to the DC area where I'm from and grew up in late 2019 to help start a firm called Zeal Capital Partners, which we scaled that. And I jumped off in July of this past year to found Willpower. I'm very excited that we just did our first close not too long ago.
Congrats, man. It's brutal, isn't it? Like, you always ask, like, how was first close? I was like, it was actually, I'm interested in your feelings. Mine, I described it was like a back alley knife fight I don't want to tell anyone about, but I'm glad I survived. I don't know. How was your first close process?
I mean, look, it's always a grind to raise capital, right? It's a challenge. You have to find the right investors. In down markets, it's difficult, and even up into the right markets can be challenging. So yes, it is a more difficult fundraising environment. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But I think you have to get back to basics and really understand, like, what is that right fit from a partnership standpoint on the limited partner side for your strategy. And we're very fortunate to work with some fantastic investors I feel very privileged to work with that add strategic value along with capital and connectivity and things of that nature. And so we still got some wood to chop. We got to get to the final close. We got to make great investments, but I'm really excited about where we are and feel very, very thankful to be in business and having these wonderful conversations.
Yeah, for sure. Can I put you on the founder spotlight? And I'm going to ask you a question I ask this is the first question I ask every founder is, as a person, tell me, why the hell did you start this business? Why'd you start this fund? Because this is a dumb way to make money, right? Like, or if your objective is purely just to make money, this is a pretty dumb way to do it. So tell me why the person is doing this. What trauma have you not worked through in your life? You wanted to start this fund?
There's a lot to unpack there. I think I might be just a masochist by nature. But honestly, if money was the only thing important to me, I would have stayed in the hedge fund world, right? Like, money's great there. But I really wasn't enjoying what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. And so that's like the first half of the answer, is to go to venture was I enjoy it better. I feel like my skill set lends itself better to the early stage versus kind of growth stage in public markets, and for a number of reasons. And then why recreate the wheel and start a new fund really is from our insight that I think the venture capital landscape is shifting pretty drastically in the market right now with the onset of generative AI, with shifting allocation dynamics from limited partners and capital sources, that I just think the venture landscape is going to look quite a bit different going forward. And we had an insight around a strategy that I think was ripe to take advantage of that. And it's one that I hadn't really seen in the market to date. And so felt compelled, having some great mentors in my corner, to push me out the risk curve to go take on a new challenge and plant our flag in the sand. And so something I'd always aspired to do. And it felt like the right time, right? Three young kids at home, just a little bit of market turmoil. Why not start a fund, right? But, you can't pick. My view on life just generally, there's no right time for anything. And so the right time is always right now if you feel like it's what you're meant to do. And so that's kind of the approach I took.
Like the view on life you mentioned. I've always been fascinated. I'm now, I don't even know what, like 8, 9 episodes in to doing this. I'd love to build on this concept you said, your view on life. Can you tell us a little bit about how you grew up? And we had such a rich conversation about how you grew up, and I would love for you to tell the audience about that. And eventually I'm going to hit the question of, like, can you draw a line between some of that and the fun? But let's just tell us about the child, little Andy Will, running around DC or wherever. Like, what was that like? At least tell the parts that you think are instructive and informative.
No,
That
I
inform
love
your,
that you asked.
yeah.
But just because as a person, I always think you have to know where you came from to know where you're going. I think it's just kind of core to all of us. And so even when I talk to founders that we're looking to invest in, that's the first question I ask is like, tell me about your childhood. How did you brought up? Like, where do you come from? Like, where are your interests? Like, let's get to the business stuff later. I want to understand who you are as a person. And so I really appreciate it as a moderator, it's kind of going there, even if it's a slightly off topic. But yeah, so really privileged to have just two wonderful parents. I feel like I hit the parent lottery on that. My father is was in the U.S. Army for 22 years. He was an oral maxillofacial surgeon in the Army. And my mother was actually in the military for 6 years as well, which few people know. But she was a general dentist in the military. So we moved around a lot. We were in San Antonio, Texas, Little Rock, Arkansas, Manhattan, Kansas, Würzburg, Germany. And we moved to the D.C. area in 2001, actually, because my father, as I mentioned, did a lot of facial reconstructive surgery. And when the war in Afghanistan kicked off, we were stationed at Walter Reed Army Medical Center here in D.C. And so he did a lot of the facial reconstruction for soldiers coming from overseas. And that was really impactful for me, honestly. Going to visit my dad at Walter Reed and seeing, 18, 19-year-old kids that are missing limbs, who have quite literally put their life on the line for our country, and to do what they feel is right. It was incredibly catalytic to me, and to see that level of courage and dedication to something that's important to you. It really set me on this path to figure out what is important to me and what are the values that I stand for and what do I want to represent in my personal life, in my professional life, in my family life. What father do I want to be? What brother do I want to be? Son, et cetera. And so I always looked up to my father to a high degree in terms of his level of service and commitment and integrity. And same with my mom. And I think the other side of it is we moved around a lot. And so I always had to make new friends. I always had my brother by my side. He was 18 months older than me. But we lived in very different communities, demographically, socioeconomically, et cetera, across the country. So I had this like broad purview of, this is in my opinion, the most unbelievable country on the earth, has unlimited opportunity, but that opportunity is not obviously spread evenly throughout society. And so I think all of those observations and the having to recreate myself throughout each stage of life was really impactful in the way that I wanted to spend my career, and kind of push me towards venture, because in a similar dynamic, you're learning something new every day. You're meeting interesting people. You're forming new relationships, et cetera. And so I think that experience of coming from a military family and kind of finding my way in the world was really impactful to what I'm doing now.
It's funny you talk about Walter Reed and working with veterans, and it strikes a nerve with me because outside my world, I work a lot in the adaptive snow sports world. I have a lot of I do a lot of work at Two Top at Whitetail Resort, and
Yeah,
adaptive,
yeah.
and I have a lot
You
of,
learn to ski there.
huh? Is that where you ski?
You learn to ski there.
That's so funny. I encounter a lot of veterans, and their story from Walter Reed strike me so much. I'm curious if you have any visions or stories that hit you, because I heard two things, like Walter Reed shaped in service, and your father, and moving a lot. I'm curious about stories that may inform that in the front of your mind.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think if I look at it, looking back in time, I always felt a little bit of guilt in that I never like formally served in the military myself, like my parents did. And I felt, that they took a personal sacrifice economically and put their, livelihood on the line because my father was deployed overseas, et cetera, to serve a country that's done so much for them. And so that spirit of service will always deeply resonate with me. And how I express that now in my life is I love working with former or current military members who are working to get into the private sector and understand the leadership skills they've attained, like what they've gained throughout their military experience. How does it translate to private markets? How do you tell your story as you're translating there? And so that experience to me was, how do you find your way to serve? And then how do you find a way to find meaning in helping others? And so having that experience from a family dynamic standpoint was incredibly impactful to me. And I'm not perfect at it. Believe me, I'm trying to get better every day, but it definitely instilled in me that core value that it's not all about you. You're a smaller part of a bigger mission, and you got to serve that mission.
Do you think being a VC is service?
I think it can be. It depends on how you practice the art of VC, right? And I think in one way, it's incredibly patriotic, right? Because we're a small part of the mission, right? The founder is the star of the show. They're putting their life on the line to go build something of meaning, but we're a part of that journey, and we're adding catalytic capital to help build a company that produces gross domestic product for a country that I love, right? And it helps drive economic impact to people in terms of jobs, in terms of wages, in terms of all these different things that if you do it in the right way and you keep the founder at the forefront and you do right by all stakeholders, I do think, you don't have to squint that hard to think that you are acting in service in the way you interact with everyone on a daily basis. Of course, we're in it to make money. Of course, we're in it to drive performance to our limited partners first and foremost, but I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think if you do business the right way, you can act in service in a way that is financially viable as well.
That's so powerful and so rare to you just put out patriotism as part of the ethos in terms of how, if you practice it right.
Well, I think I get bothered a little bit sometimes, just candidly opening up a little bit, is that patriotism, I think, especially in the current moment, unfortunately, is almost viewed as a dirty word to a certain extent.
Oh,
And,
fraught.
and it bothers me deeply, honestly, because this country has done so much for me. Like, I can't imagine being born in any other place to have this level of opportunity to go build something of meaning and do what I truly love to do. And so, I try and reframe what patriotism means to me and talk about it with others, so maybe they look at it in a bit of a different light as well.
Let's just go there. What does it mean to you? And then when you said, I want to connect two things you said. One, patriotism, means a lot to me and I'd love to define it. And then two, it can be patriotic if you do, VC can be patriotic if you do it the right way. Can you build us your bridge between the two? This is what I think about. Are you comfortable telling me a little what you think about your version of patriotism? And then I'm very curious, as much as tactically as you want to say or strategically, how that manifests in how willpower conducts its business.
I love that you brought that up, because I do think it's inherently patriotic doing what we do, right? Is because you have the ability, being a venture capitalist or an entrepreneur is more directly tied to it. But you get to build the world you want to see, right? Like in our society, if you think things are going wrong in our society, right, from a democratic perspective, you can actually go into the capital markets and enact change by creating solutions to solve the problems that you want to see in your society, which is deeply patriotic, right? Because you can actually shift the societal dynamics, the access to opportunity, the financial accretion to marginalized communities, however you want to frame it. You have the ability to enact true change at a societal level for a country you care deeply about. And so it's hard for me to almost think how that's not patriotic. Of course, if you're a bad actor, you're disingenuous, you're not of high integrity, you don't put the founder first and foremost, you don't honor all stakeholders around the table, you can certainly go down a slippery slope in one avenue or another. But I think when you focus on solving core problems in society through capital markets or through capitalistic means, I think it's inherently patriotic act if you do it the right way. And I'm happy to extrapolate if there's areas to go in. I'm not sure if that answered the question directly, but
keep going. I want to. It's rare to have someone talk about it and be so open and candid about it. So let's just go for it. Tell me what it means, and then tell me so maybe it's around thesis, maybe it's connect the dots for me as if I were, I don't know, I studied a lot.
Yeah,
eighth grade,
totally.
an eighth grade kid taking political systems for the first time. And I believe this and willpower does it this way. And I would love to just get that, because it is such a fraught term right now.
No, I think
for a variety of reasons. And to be honest, even before everything of the format, no matter what you think about, it was a fraught term. I think You've been doing this a lot before this presidential administration, so it was a fraught term then, I'd imagine. So I would love for you to like just set that up for me as bright line as plain speak as possible. Patriotism in my world looks like this, and then the fun looks like this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, so I look at it kind of in kind of three buckets of how can you have an impact on society and change problems that you see at a societal level, at a sector level, at a enterprise level, however you want to frame that. You can go through philanthropic. If you're fortunate enough to have a disposable income, you can make philanthropic donations or grants to marginalized communities or endeavors that you care deeply about, and that does have an impact. You can fund other kind of grant making activity through foundations and things like that are still on a relatively micro scale, in my opinion. Or you can go build for-profit entities that solve those core problems at scale, right? And so to me, that is the most patriotic way to, because that's what our country was founded on, right? We're a democratic society. We're this unbelievable experiment when we were founded as a country that gave access and opportunity and democratic vote to the people. And so if you want to see something change, you actually have the ability to do so in the American society. And so to me, when you see an issue, if you don't act on it, and if you're a thesis-driven investor, you get to go proactively find those business models that work to solve the issues you see in the market and come up and help them find a way to build something of meaning that can both be financially viable, but also solve the problems that you see in this world. And it doesn't have to be impact either, right? I'm not talking about just impact investing, but if you see structural inefficiencies in the market that can drive more opportunity for more individuals, go solve it, right? And I just don't see how that's not a patriotic act, right? And just because you make money from it doesn't mean you're also not doing what is right in your view for society. So that's how I kind of tie the two together. I just don't view them as mutually exclusive.
Is this in your fundraising deck? I mean, do you talk about this, or I'm just curious if this is part of your. We all get this question, right? How do you stand out? Why does the world need another VC? Da, 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 da. Is any of this out there?
No, to be quite honest with you, I mean, I think for anyone, I think one of the things I actually enjoy about fundraising is building long-term relationships, right? It's kind of like getting married with someone and when you have a 10-year fun life. And so I think it comes out in discussion, right? Is it going to come out in the first initial pitch? No, we're going to talk about my background. We're going to talk about the fund strategy. We're going to talk about how we're going to make money for you, et cetera. But in the second and third conversation, it gets more personal. And I think especially in my opinion, the most high quality diligence process, you really get into what drives the individual. And so it does come out in some of those conversations, but it's not as forward as putting it in the deck or things like that, because, and I could be wrong about this, but I feel a little disingenuous just writing it down and pitching it as like a product per se, because it's really just who I am as a person. And so there's a tension there that I haven't quite figured out, to be quite honest, and I might have it missing. And maybe I do need to change my fundraising pitch to a certain extent, but that's at least how I've initially thought of it.
I am certainly not here to tell you that you're fundraising, but I'll tell you as someone has privileged enough to have a second conversation with you, I think I'm always struck by you. And that's how you were. I mean, our first conversation spanned from patriotism to faith and like the fun. And then when I look at your thesis, I was like, oh, wait, this is like very, at least on the website and the public materials of what I have, it's very just more open in terms of B2B and looking at that. Although, if someone knows you and talks to you, and also your background being at Zeal, which is such a specific thesis, I'm just kind of curious. It sounds to me that you're like kind of setting up breadcrumbs, and in the relationship you want to build a consolidated view of what the trail of breadcrumbs is. Is that right?
I think it's a fair way to put it, but I just think no one invests in you unless they really know who you are as a person and they feel compelled by who you are. Because at the end of the day, yes, you can have differentiation in your approach, you can have differentiated skill sets, et cetera, but like true differentiation, in my view, comes down to the manager and who they are as people and how they act and how do they approach sourcing, how do they approach portfolio management, how do they approach tough, difficult conversations. And so the only way that I've found to show who I am as a person is to be vulnerable, to open up, right, a little bit. And I think specifically topics that a little bit bother me in society, at least the way that they're framed, I feel almost more compelled to be more open and honest about them. So as you mentioned, patriotism, that word has always bothered me a little bit in terms of some of the connotations people feel in the market. Religion, that's another one that I think we've, as a society, have almost put a little bit of a negative spin on it to a certain extent. It's really important to me and who I am as a person, and how I bring myself in the world every day. And so if people are willing to talk about it, I'm unafraid to say, I'm a proud Catholic. I'm a person of faith. It's a really important a component of who I am in terms of my value system, in terms of, how we live our family life, in terms of how we interact in the world and the good we want to see in the world. And so I just think you can't detach away from those things, or else you're just not authentically you, and you're never going to be great at whatever you're doing if you're trying to be someone you're not. And so I just think that authenticity and that vulnerability are just core tenets of, building real relationships with people. And so I try and lead with that. I'm not perfect at it. Don't get me wrong. I get embarrassed about things. I shy away from topics at times if I'm not feeling comfortable, but I certainly do my best to try and be transparent, direct, and mean what I say and say what I mean.
Dude, that's amazing. I mean, like, one of the things I love about this, would you, you don't have to isolate or identify any particular conversations, but what you just talked about, and I believe a lot of the reasons you had a successful first close is because you've been able to complete that arc. If there's an aspiring GP or another, frankly, not even inspiring, another solo GP out there listening who's struggling, and that is one of a consistent theme of this podcast has been, how do I weave my narrative into my fund, etc. Yours may be one of the most difficult for a variety of external, like, can you like ABC 1, 2, 3 identify? Let's start with an investor where you've been able to like connect those dots and it led to an investment. Can you? I just, it's not to out any particular thing, but just so people can see like tactically, this is how you do it, or how I did it successfully and navigate this. Dude, that's a super tricky course.
It is tricky, and
Yeah. Do you have a
I'll
story?
shy.
You have a story, a play by play you can like I met this person, we started here, we did this, and then it ended up here, and we both understand each other as this. Something like that. Do you have a story you could share?
Well, I'm going to shy away from answering that question directly, just because I don't know where the right and left bounds lie as I'm actively fundraising and what I can actually say about the direct fundraising process. I think we're still in okay territory, but I'd rather just keep it safe, kind of as we're going in that direction. But what I will say is that what I think. Well, we haven't found success yet. First, I'll say that, right? Yes, we reached our first close. I'm very, very proud of that, but we're not at the finish line, right? We have not done our final close on the fund. We're not where we want to be quite yet, but we're going and we're pushing hard to get there, and we'll do everything in our power there. But what I've kind of observed in the market, at least from other solo GPs or multi GP structures, those who have struggled to raise a little bit more, or it's taken longer, or they end up not finding the level of success that they're looking for, it's because you get a lot of no's, and it's easy to get demoralized, right? You're going to have your hard days, but you have to have some type of external support system that's going to keep you focused, keep you motivated, keep you moving in the right direction. And that's where I tie all this together, is that if I didn't have my faith in my family, I don't know how I would react to those hard days. Maybe I would give up in the end. Maybe I would make a different decision here and there. But having my wife, who's just the most solid rock I've ever had in my life, I couldn't do this without her. Having my kids who look up to me and are just wonderful and inspire me every day, because I have to look at them in the eyes as I go out to work every day and go make it happen. That's incredibly inspiring to me. And on my difficult days, I have to talk to God and talk about my faith a little bit and figure out what I need to do better the next day to find a bit more success. And so to me, a lot of people who have a little bit more challenges in that department just might not have the right support system around them to keep them pushing in the right direction, because it's attainable. It's hard. It's an uphill battle, but it is certainly attainable. And I would encourage anyone who feels like this is the right path for them, go do it with everything you got, but make sure you have that support system around you, because there are hard days and you got to persevere through them.
Gotcha. Wow. Like, you strike me as one of the best people, humans I've had. And it's funny, since our first filming of the pod and the second, I interviewed Charles Hudson from Precursor.
Oh, he's wonderful.
And one of the conversations, we had a lot of things, but I prompted him with one of our thoughts. It's like, it's really hard to market being a good person. And that was what we talked about our first time. And that was, I don't know, it was struck to me, like, really all, if you think about, and I'll give a synopsis of this. He's like, look, there's sort of two camps currently, and I would love your reactions to this sentiment. At the pre-seed level and seed level, this institutionalization has kind of created this fissure. There's basically an algo version. We only invest in these particular search parameters, and it's more algorithmic. and then there's artisans, right? And the artisans have to work on character, people, uniqueness, quirkiness, vulnerability. And his argument then is like it butts up against institutional capital, because institutional capital, they want to write large checks, they can get an algorithm. And then what I get from you in the first half of our conversation and the previous conversation was very much on the artisan personal side. Like it was like a man versus machine discussion. I guess my thought is, do you have any reactions to that feeling of like, as you've been both competing for capital and deals, this algo versus, is that a fair characterization in terms of how you think about it? And I'm curious about where you fall on that decision about who you want to be and where you want to be.
Yeah, no, I do agree with it. I agree with the framing. I do think there's kind of two separate camps in that. We definitely skew more towards the artisan side of things. But even with that, I'm also a very data centric person, right? And I think you have to have the data to back up all of your opinions and your gut feelings. And the more data you have, the stronger the gut feeling, the higher the conviction, the more willing to move in a certain direction. But that data can come in many different forms, right? We try and warehouse data on founder profiles. So like whether it's like, where does the founder come from? What is their background? What are the early signs of entrepreneurial spirit? How passionate are they about the project they're solving? What's the personal connection to what they're doing? And so we build this kind of mosaic of factors that we've seen from studying previous successful exits or previous business cycles, et cetera. And we compile that data in the background that helps inform our artisanal approach, to be quite honest with you. And it might be a bit of a cop-out answer to a certain extent, but we truly believe that, look, especially at the early stage, you can't be that algo. I just don't see a way to do it, because there's tons of false signal on product market fit. You're not valuing a company based on purely financial means. There is gray area left, right, and in the center that you have to evaluate and you have to cut through, and you have to make a determination of how convicted are you on the people doing it and what they're doing. And so I think you have to blend the two together. But if I was kind of gun to my head, if you will, we definitely skew more towards the artisan side at the early stage. Now, if you're more of a growth stage investor, then I think that dynamic shifts a little bit. You have more data to grab onto. You have more comparables in the market that you can compare investments to, et cetera. And so I'm not sure I've figured it out by any means, especially when and I think to your point, the come to Jesus moment, if you will, is when you're pitching LPs is they want to know, what's your approach? How are you cutting through your funnel? How are you making investment decisions, et cetera? And that can get a little bit more difficult to productize and give a cookie cutter response to. But I also think that is the art of this, right? And that's why I hope that, AI is not going to take my job, is because you have to have that judgment call. You have to have that artisan side at the early stage to really drive alpha, in my opinion.
Can you share anything about like what is a good willpower founder that kind of strikes, a little bit of country, a little bit of Western, like it strikes the right balance? Can you say more about what that looks like? I mean, you're at seed plus, kind of leading the A in that stage. Maybe I'm curious how you tease that out, either formally or informally, in your underwriting process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I mean, I think we look at a lot of different factors, but I would say like founder market fit is a huge thing for us. Like certain firms they have a strong bias towards repeat founders, right? And that can be a great strategy, and you're probably going to pay higher prices you have that premium associated with that experience. Or certain people like young founders right out of college or dropouts from college, where they can really get their hands dirty, work with them, influence change within the organization, et cetera. We're a little less dogmatic about what is that background per se of that founder. We want to really understand why they're uniquely positioned to solve this specific problem. And even if they're the first to market in that category, if there's outsized profits to be gained, there will be new entrants into the market to compete those profits away. And so being a first mover is not the end all be all. They still have to have the there. It could be a deep personal connection to the problem that they're solving. Like, for example, one of my previous track record companies is Susu. The two founders are first generation immigrants. Wimimo Abbey specifically, he was immigrant from Lagos, Nigeria with his mother. He immigrated to Minnesota, went to 5 different banks to get a personal loan to get their start in America, got turned down from all of them, had to go to a payday lender, paid a 270% APR interest rate on their initial loan to get their start in the US. And it was this experience that was all too tragic for many immigrants, low wealth consumers in the US, et cetera. And that set him on this mission to say there has to be a better way to this, to build credit, to build a financial identity in a new country, et cetera. And that was the birth of Susu with his co-CEO and co-founder, Samir Gul, but a very similar story. And so that is one unique scenario, but there has to be a why now, a why this problem, a why this team. It could come from 20 years of experience in a category. We have these unique insights about gaps in the market, and there's a new technological shift that makes something accessible that it wasn't previously. And so we really try and get to know the founder, understand why they're uniquely positioned to go do this, and why when there's inevitable competition, they're going to end up winning. And so there's not a, I guess, end answer there, but that's what we're trying to tease out through these conversations. And I don't think you can do it exclusively virtually either.
Yeah.
So we always go in person with the founder. We always take them out to dinner. We want to get in the casual atmosphere, understand how do they treat the wait staff? How do they, handle conversation if we're late? Are they frustrated? Like what's their demeanor like? I think you get all these nuanced signals from spending time in person with people in different environments.
I love that. It's funny. I was having dinner. No, I'm sober, but I'm right now having a drink with another investor on Wednesday. And I said the same thing. Ideally, I've done exceptions, but like for almost all my deals, I want to break bread with the founder. Have you ever had an experience where you've pulled out or gotten conviction on that dinner? I'm actually curious now. Is that pro forma or is it really part of the diligence process?
100%. Yeah, inextricably, yes. We have definitely had follow-up questions post a dinner in terms of getting to know someone a little bit better. And look, everyone has off days too. Like we don't put everything on the dinner, right? You might be not feeling very well. You might have had a fight with your girlfriend or your wife right before it. You might have had some family issue, etc. But if there is something weird in that conversation or in that interaction, etc., that bothers us, we just attack it head on. We say like, hey, this was a little bit weird. What was going on there? Were you having a bad day? Did this happen? Et cetera, et cetera. And so we haven't had a scenario where that wasn't absolutely explainable and we felt, very valid, and then had future interactions that were very positive and still move forward with it. And so it, I think, teases out more deep conversation. And as we were talking about, like, how do you get to a deep conversation organically with someone? It's usually in those type of interactions where something went wrong or something was a little bit off or et cetera, and you get to know really who someone is. And so, no, we haven't specifically pulled out of a deal after a dinner, but we've certainly not ended up investing in a company because other factors, and that being one of them.
That's a tough one. I mean, for me, I go through this monologue when I have this, and it's very internal and very personal. And we all have our own heuristics, like would I work for this person, or would I introduce this person? Do you have any of these I still don't think the direct answer of those judgment calls is a binary, like I asked this question, output is X, therefore decision Y. But I would love to live there as you're teasing out, like, hey, we're walking home from dinner and this happened. Like, what are some of the questions you ask? You don't have to give the resolution. I'm just curious, how do you resolve that in your head from these very qualitative personal interactions?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, that's the artisan of this, right? And I think it's one of the reasons this is incredibly fun to be a part of, and I feel so honored to be able to do this as my job. Because look, if there was an exact formula, it would take all the fun out of it, in my opinion. Because we live in nuance. Like, I think, to get real meta for you, I think it's what's one of the structurally wrong things about our society today is no one is willing to live in nuance. Like, you have your camp, you have your camp, and we're just going to fight tooth and nail to get our points across. That's just not how the world works. And I try and approach those conversations with entrepreneurs in the exact same manner. Is, look, this might not have been the exact way that I would have liked to frame it, but like, what do you mean by that? Like, what made you think that? What did you have an experience that led to that insight? You try and peel back the onion and understand what brought them to that headspace where they said something that you might disagree with, or you questioned how they interacted with an individual or how they handled a certain situation. If you just take it as face value, I don't think you actually get to the meat of what you're looking to figure out there. And so I don't have an exact answer for you, but I always try and ask more questions than I make statements or anything like that. Because if you just keep asking questions and pull more information out, you get a better mosaic of like, what are all the contributing factors?
It's funny. I was talking about doing this internal monologue. And I realized that this is the artifact of being a solo GP, right? Like, we don't have someone else to talk about it with. Maybe this is a good segue from thinking about the dinner walk by yourself when you're coming back from founder dinner is more asking the question, like, to ask like why you became a solo GP, or we're musing these things by yourself, because you're really connected, right? You were at Zeal, like we share. I mean, you were at Listen, shout to Listen Ventures in Chicago.
Rick and Jeff.
Rick and Jeff were investors, and when I was last an operator at Own Up. But you're connected. Why, when you started Willpower, did you charge out on your own and be a solo GP?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and we honestly might differ on this one. I'd love to hear what you say on that side of things, but I felt like I had to be a solo GP to start, just because there's not in a specific. It's not like I was spinning out of a Sequoia or an Excel, and I have another partner I'd been working with for 5 or 6 years that we have trust and rapport. We know how we work together, and we're going to go do this endeavor together. And if you don't have that longevity of relationship, I think building a partnership net new without that kind of longevity of relationship, you're creating systemic risk in the organization. Like the vast majority of venture capital firms who ultimately don't achieve what they're looking to achieve, a lot of it comes down to partnership dynamics.
Preach.
And so to me, always, being a high level team, I played Division I athletics in Notre Dame. I've always been in a team environment. I've been on the trading floor at JP Morgan in the hedge fund environment. It was always a high pressure team, collegial type of environment. And I really thrive in those environments. I want to be challenged. I want to have direct conversations. I want to, get to great decisions together. But I'm not willing to compromise the partnership dynamic or the integrity of the firm to do so. And so I felt like the best path forward is to start as a solo GP, to raise the fund, continue to have those high quality conversations with prospective co-GPs or people who will graduate into the GP in future funds, and build that trust and rapport over time. Because candidly, my goal is to be I would almost argue to say mandate for myself is to be a multi-GP structure by fund two, because that is where I think I do the best work and what would be best for our organization. But I'm not willing to compromise on the quality of the individual we're going to partner with. And so if it happens 6 months from now, 2 years from now, 4 years from now, we'll make it happen when the time's right. And I have zero ego about raising the entire fund and keep cutting someone as an equal partner if they're the right fit. And so I think that's another thing that I've found in the market, that sometimes people get a little bit, ego is probably the right term. I did this. Why do you get a piece of this? And I think that's a zero-sum way of thinking. If you have the right partner, then the pie just gets bigger, and hopefully everyone makes more money, or everyone has the impact that they're looking to achieve because of that dynamic. And so if it comes down to the person, I know I do better in teams. I'm totally satisfied to do it alone, and to have that external validation with like people like yourself and other co-investors that I respect and care deeply about, and we can have that dialogue outside of the organization. But it is my desire to expand when it's all said and done.
Yeah, you asked what I think. I have the same answer. It's like I see so clearly what I want to do, and the time to do that, it just to wait and try and do it. Like it feels like anti to everything I want to do. And it's almost anti what I would tell any of my founders to do.
Yeah,
like
totally.
Like, I see this market. I know I can raise the capital. I can launch this product. I just want a CTO. I would tell them like, go launch. And for me, I would feel like a hypocrite. It's just not me to not do what I would tell my founders to do. And at the end of the day, would I bring on a co-founder? Should you hire a CTO and give them a founder level? Sure, for the right person, of course. And that was a lot of my operating roles in the past, including like kind of own up. I was first, post founder C, and there's problems that can be solved with money or cap tables are not problems. Problems that can't be solved with money and cap, like a split up. I don't know what you think. Like that's how I rationalized it. And I'm in your camp on this.
And guess what? There's a lot of market forces that try and force you into a different decision, in my opinion. And look, I'll be vulnerable on this. Like, I have had multiple investors who would have theoretically written very impactful checks for our firm, with the caveat, let's help you find a partner.
Yes.
If we bring in a partner, we're in. And I have to say no, because just not how I operate. Like, you can't dangle money in front of me to compromise my moral compass of what I think is right for our organization. And if we end up with a slightly smaller fund for fund one because of it, I can live with that, because we're being true to who we are and what we think is right in terms of building enduring value for the next 30 years, not for this fund.
Exactly. I'm in the same boat, and I've gone on GP dates, and there's a long GP date. And a lot of people are wondering, this is one, you idiots. Who knows? But I'm in the same camp on this, and I refuse to let the tail wag the dog on how we look at all of this. I mean, many of LPs, like one of my good friends and allocators said, "You're dead to me." I mean, it's one of my best friends in the. Yeah. It's like, "You're dead to me." I was like, well, that hurts.
Only a true friend can cut to the core like that quickly.
Yeah. I wonder too this, and tell me what you think about this. Like, I also think, look, on the meta level, I think there is a secret network of us. And this podcast is there's a reason I named this Alone Together, right? I don't know. Give me your reactions. I don't know if people are aware of how these networks are actually proliferating on a real practical level. And I wonder if it becomes a big deal. And once an LP actually gets this, that maybe the shade about solo GPs goes away, and or more specifically, they can de-risk this, because the statistics exactly are clear, right? Like if you get hit by a bus versus you break, I was like, the statistics of breaking up in a partnership are like, have to be someone is a statistician could look this up, like have to be orders of magnitude more than getting hit by a bus. I mean, how close have you ever been getting hit by a bus?
I'm pretty quick. I can get out of the way,
Good athlete.
give a little shimmy. But in reality, I couldn't agree more. I think that's, if you gave me a wish list of like maybe a sentiment change in the market a little bit, is probably viewing that risk profile a little bit differently. And I mean, no disrespect, but I understand that a great partnership is a wonderful de-risking mechanism, right? Because you have multiple key people, you have multiple decision makers, you can, you don't have that single point of failure, et cetera. But I don't think you can view it as a de-risking mechanism if you don't have that long tenure of relationship and that trust and values alignment that we talked about earlier. And so my wish was, to your point, what I tell LPs who always press me on that issue is that I believe that the probability of getting hit by a bus or something happening, like I'm a young, healthy guy, is far less than introducing a partner into this that could go sideways and derail what we're trying to accomplish as an organization. And so if that sentiment could shift just 5 or 10%, I'd be a happy man. But I do understand where people are coming from as well. It's not an exact science, but again, it's back to living in nuance.
Yeah, and here's what I think too. And now you have me. You can let me know. I need to shut up as host. I'm talking more than I normally do.
No, I love it.
I think that if LPs knew that these networks existed and they were functional, like we really do, like, and I've diligenced, in fact, I'm diligencing now with another GP and we're collaborating on our diligence process, and you get all the benefits from a de-risking on the portfolio without the partnership risk. Like my docs are really clear. I die, like this is what happens. Like it shuts. Even though in partnerships you may have breakup clauses, etc., it's still not clear when it gets enacted what, right, and how broken is broken. And so I look at LPs, I'm like, look, I don't know if you are statistically, I don't think that's the case in terms of what the risk you're writing, and also I think procedurally I'm not sure you're underwriting the risk, but what the hell do I know, right? I'm just solo GP just raising fund one. I just read docs, and I don't know. And I guess my point is, in your reaction, like, well, maybe like I'll turn this, like, I think there's informal networks, or obviously are. This is how we got connected, that I think can serve as a synthetic partner, right? And there's a whole bunch of structures ranging from things like this, or how you structure an operating or a venture partner agreement where you get all the taste and none of the calories, or fewer of the calories. Do you have thoughts on this? And if so, I'm curious about how you have like navigated this, either in docs or venture partnership or alliances. Am I crazy?
I don't think you're crazy. I tend to agree with you, but I do want to, be very clear that it's certainly not me being disrespectful or, questioning like the LP universe that has very strong feelings on this. Like, no, and I mean, it's not me pandering to fundraising. It's just that my opinion on that is probably from their seat. If I put myself in their seat,
Yeah.
is that there's a lot of funds to invest in, right? Like there's no shortage of managers in the market. I think that's clear to everyone. They're probably underwriting this, looking at not, hey, are you a solo GP, or if you add a partner, now you're de-risked, but like, am I willing to take the risk profile on a solo GP versus finding another partnership dynamic that has that long tenure together, that has those de-risking elements that we look for? And so I try not be emotional about it, try not to oversell my book, if you will. But I think it just comes down to like, you want to be with the right people. And if you're having to fight the conversation to say, no, you're not thinking about this right, or no, you're not quantifying this risk appropriately, it's just not the right relationship. And look, just like there's a ton of GPs to invest in, there's also a lot of LP money out there. Even as every headline says it's all going away and it's only going to 7 funds or whatever the number is, et cetera, there's still, I mean, America's the wealthiest country on earth. There's tons of money out there. And you just have to find who are those investors that fit within your strategy, who believe in what you're doing, who understand the elements that you're talking about. I'm just not someone who's going to argue with that mentality, because I think it comes from a great place, and we just might not be the right fit for that partnership. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I get it. Thank you for bringing it back. We got off on the rails, and
No,
LPs.
I think it's a great conversation to have, because all of us think about it, right? And so let's talk about it. There are tons of nuances to this.
Yeah, I guess the last parting shot I have on this is it's not to. I think there's some people who look at that risk as risk, but I would love if an LP underwrites that risk, that they did it with true transparency of what's happening in the market on real time, in frankly in WhatsApp, on text, in Discord channels, and whatever, I know but we have our own shadow networks of things that we work in, and it's not we're holding it from people. It's just more that there is scaffolding. I think maybe I'll say this for the LPs listening: there's more scaffolding than ever before for solo GPs to be able to distribute that risk. And and if they underwrite, if they say they don't want to do it, I just hope that just know that exists, and that's part of your model, and you decide it's not your cup of tea. Totally cool. But if you never, I guess I would say for, all one or two LPs listening is wait, if you don't want to do solo GPs and didn't know that that this network existed, the Underground Railroad exists on our side, maybe dial into it every now and then come up with your own conclusion. I mean, that's my invitation versus GPs who don't invest in solo GPs are bad. It's more just
I agree with you. And I think I'd almost put the onus back on us. We need to show them, right? I don't think we've done a great job of bringing them into those networks and showing that interaction, showing the different WhatsApp and Discord and Slack channels that we're part of, the level of collaboration, the monthly and weekly calls that I have with a lot of close co-investor friends, et cetera, the sharing of anytime I co-invest with a lot of the trusted partners, they send me their investment memo, I send them my investment memo. We compare notes on that. We're looking at the different risk factors to the deal together, et cetera. And you're kind of you're getting me thinking a lot more that I could probably do a lot better job of articulating why I feel comfortable going at this alone, why I have a high degree of confidence and conviction in our strategy as a solo GP, because I have an unbelievable advisory board that, I'm texting with weekly about different topics and things like that. I think a lot of LPs look at it and they're like, oh, it's a nice advisory board on a paper, but they're not actually doing anything. So I think the onus is on us to drive that narrative forward and keep the receipts, show that, look, I'm not actually doing this alone. I have this huge support system around me who are, invested in my success, and I'm invested in their success, because we can't do it alone. And so I think that's a really good thought that I hadn't put enough thought into, that I probably need to do better at, to be quite honest with you.
I don't know. I think you're amazing. And if I had money, I'd be more of an LP and stuff. Which I don't. We're both we're sunk in. Maybe let's pivot to that a little bit, as I'm being so hogging of your time as it is.
No, you're not hogging anything. I love it.
Maybe let's for the people who are listening, first close, what would be, as someone who's post first close and someone who's listening, either aspiring to think about starting a fund, either solo GP or not, do you have a piece of advice for them? Actually, I'm going to take just for the solo GP, people who are thinking about starting a firm alone. What is top 2 or 3 bits of advice you'd give for them, given where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, the first and foremost, the number of conversations I have with folks who are considering going down this path and want to understand what it's like, how my experience has been, et cetera. It's just so easy. We're all human. I went through this process as well, but it's so easy to make excuses of why the timing is not perfect right now. The market's not great. I need another 5 deals of track record under my belt. I need one of my companies to exit. I'm getting married next year, or I just had a baby. There's a lot of life factors that are real that can deter you from doing it. And my suggestion is always if this is what you feel like you were meant to do and you're ready to take on that challenge, just go do it. Because there's no better way to figure this all out than actually doing it. But comes back to my point earlier too, as you're preparing to do it, make sure you have the support system around you, because as a solo GP, I think you can attest to it too. Even with all the support around us from our co-investors and things like that, it is a bit of a lonely experience. And you're dealing with the struggle 100%. Days internally and mentally on those, and the highs as well. And it oscillates, right? And so, what that support structure looks like is to each person to determine. But those are the 2 main pieces of advice I give everyone is no one would have told me that the right time to go start a fund is when I just had my third child. We got a mortgage here. We had just moved into a new house. My wife was getting ready to change roles internally at Google. There was just a lot of moving factors at the time, but it would be easier for me to say, like, you know what, let's do it next year. Let's do it next year. But I think you can get into this repetition of like, there's a good reason to do this, that, or the other. If you feel like you're meant to do it and you have that fire in your belly to go do it, go do it. Like, because there's nothing better in the world, in my opinion, than having the privilege to go build something of meaning from scratch that you can be really proud of.
Maybe this is we're coming up an hour. Like, I'd love to finish with the fast 4 questions, and maybe
Let's do
those are like on this. And I'm gonna jump on what you just said about not being alone. The first one is this about what you talked about being alone and like not being alone, and you need to organize your people around you. Is there someone you want to shout out who is most influential to you as part of your tribe to get going?
Yeah. Two individuals that I'll shout out. One's Kevin Compton. He runs Radar Partners in Palo Alto. He's a Notre Dame alum as well, and has just been an unbelievable mentor to me. I'm helping with advice, which thinking about the strategy with key decisions that we were going to make, and just an incredibly kind, humble person who candidly does not need to give me any of his time, but has been just so good to me in terms of kind of building that trust and rapport and dynamic of kind of feeling the confidence to go do this. And the second would be Bob Cagle, another venture capitalist from the Bay Area, who's one of the co-founders of Benchmark. He's been an incredibly amazing mentor of mine who has helped push my thinking in a number of levels, has taught me what great looked like when they were building Benchmark, the things they did great, the things he wishes he could have done better. And so just to have a front row seat and lessons learned from something as prolific as that was built, I just feel so privileged to even have that information at my disposal. And so those two individuals, I thank them every chance I get for being a friend and mentor of mine, and nothing can say thank you enough because they've been really, really good to me.
Amazing. Question 2, you talked about low lows. Do you have a story in building Willpower so far that was your lowest low?
Yeah, I do. So I did my first close, it's like 8 days after Liberation Day. And so I lost a significant number of commitments leading up to my first close. And that was tough, right? It doesn't really change the long trajectory of the fundraise, and still incredibly happy about the momentum and kind of where we're going as a firm. But I had a day where I was upset. I think it was just me processing my ego, candidly, of, look, mother market has a say. You can only control what you can control. If you keep, focus on the inputs, not the outputs. Like, I have that taped on my monitor up here every single day, because you can't control what the end state is, but you can certainly control what you do each day to build towards it. And so that was a low day, but then the next day you pick yourself up by your bootstraps, you get back to work and keep making it happen.
That's a tough one. Flip, highest high so far.
Highest high. I mean, I think it's the first commitment I got, to be honest with you, and because that gave me the confidence to say, there's people who want this strategy, who believe in me as a manager. This has legs to it. And so I won't say the individual specifically, but it was a family office who I didn't know previously. That's the other thing, is it wasn't a personal network either. So yes, I had wonderful people that I've known for a while who believed enough in me to support me in the early innings. But it's almost like when I'm looking at a founder and their first 2 customers are companies they previously worked at. Awesome. You should definitely go do that. But it's not giving me signal that, like, this is a need in the market, or there's product market fit here, et cetera. Go make a net new sale and see how that process goes. I kind of view it the same as this. This gave me all the confidence in the world to say, you know what, there's something here. Let's go push the gas and go make it happen.
Yeah, that was, I had that too. I remember screaming, "Let's go," from my office when that happened. The stranger.
Yeah,
was huge.
Totally.
Here's the last one. I'm going to take you out on this. Our children are very important to us, right? How would you pick a decade from now, your children to understand your work and what willpower is, and this phase of your life? Do you have any idea? Can you share what you want that description to look like, or hope it is to be?
Gosh, that is a great question. I don't know if I've thought really deeply about how I want them to view willpower specifically and what we're able to accomplish there. I don't find quite as much meaning with my kids in that specific capacity, but what I do want them to see is how I carry myself, how I treat people I work with, how I treat entrepreneurs that I invest in, how I treat our limited partners who we're fortunate enough to work with. How do we handle difficult situations? If dad had a bad day, is he coming home and he's yelling and he's frustrated and he's doing those things? Or does he take a big deep breath at the front door, put a big smile on his face, go throw his kids on the back and let's go play some catch in the backyard or something like that? And so, I try and pay a lot of attention of like, how do I manage my emotions? How do I ride the highs and lows? How do I still be a present father and a present husband to my wife? Managing all this other stuff on the back end. And so I'm probably less concerned about what they think from a success standpoint of what we're able to accomplish at Willpower. But I do think they're going to remember how we went about building it, how we treat the people we interact with. And I hope they're proud of me at the end of the day on that.
Amazing. Andy, this has been an hour of amazing fun. I feel blessed that we had a second time to do this. I hope it's the second of many. And I'm excited to find something to work together on formally. In the meanwhile, I have nothing but gratitude for you and congratulations for you on your first close. I did not know it happened right after Liberation Day. So I double applaud you. Thanks so much for being on the pod. And I'm excited. I'm just happy to know that people like you exist in our little world.
It's very kind of you to say. Thank you so much for having me on the platform. Second time's the charm, but I love both interactions, and I hope it leads to many more. We're going to co-invest together, and just can't thank you enough for having me on the pod.
All right, well, thank you. We'll leave it there. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into another episode of Alone Together. I'm your host, Mike. Oh, I forgot to say this. If people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that? I almost forgot the most important part. I was doing my outro.
No, I mean, actually a core kind of value, at least for us, is that we want to be accessible to all. And so please visit us at willpowervc.com. There's an intake form for any founders who are building a vertical market software business and want to submit a request to have a conversation about what you're building. We review every single submission. Of course, we're a small team. And so if it's out of thesis or it's not on topic, there's not a guarantee we're going to respond to every submission, but everything that's on thesis, believe me, they're being reviewed on a daily basis, and we'll certainly be in touch if there's a relevant connection to be made on that. Also, we're on LinkedIn. You can find Willpower Venture Capital or me specifically, Andy Well. I'd be happy to connect on those platforms as well.
All right. With that, I'm really going to leave it there and really let you get back to your busy day, or at least start enjoying your weekend. Thanks so much for being on Alone Together. Until next time, everyone, I'm Mike Ma, and I will see you out there.
Thank you so much, Mike. Take care, everyone.